Hello and welcome back to the Movie Memo Recaps. Today we are going to recap a 2016 movie titled Kill Kane. Please be advised that there will be spoilers ahead. In the opening scene, we are introduced to a male patient in a hospital. He slowly awakens, his vision blurred. A doctor approaches and addresses him as Mr. Ray Brooks, asking how he is feeling. As Ray begins to regain consciousness, the first thing he does is inquire about his family. However, the doctor declines to answer the question. Instead, the doctor explains that Ray had been in a medically induced coma for the previous 3 months following a major chest injury. He assures Ray that his rehabilitation went easily and without issues. Ray, still anxious, inquires about his family once more, but the doctor informs him that the police would be coming to speak with him shortly, without providing any other information. Later, a police officer named Shelby questions Ray in an interrogation room. Ray begins to explain what happened. He reveals that there are 3 males, and it all began one night as he and his wife, Kim, were heading home. They got lost, so Ray stopped to check for the map in the trunk. As soon as he got out of the car, he noticed 3 men savagely beating a young man nearby. While everyone was waiting, their leader, Frank Noonan, arrived. Without hesitation, Frank got a gun from one of his men and killed the young man in front of them. Ray froze for a brief period, terrified, before the men saw him. Panicked, he hurried back to his car and raced away before they could grab him. Inside the car, Kim observes Ray is visibly frightened and asks him what happened. Ray informs her in a panic that he has just witnessed an execution. Kim, horrified, asks him to contact the police immediately. But Ray, still shocked, argues they can't. He says that these folks are violent gangsters and that getting involved could endanger both of their lives. The scene returns to the inquiry, with Officer Shelby requesting Ray to identify the guys who came to his house by looking at a series of photographs. Ray hesitates for a time before asking Shelby if this means he'll have to testify in court. When Shelby confirms, Ray instantly backs down. He shakes his head and informs the officer that if he testifies against these thugs, he will die long before the trial begins. Ray is obviously scared and unwilling to take the risk. Shelby, sensing Ray's concern, promises him police protection and slides his business card across the table, asking him to call him if he changes his mind. Shelby stands up and exits the room, leaving Ray in deep meditation. After a while, Ray returns to his home. As he reaches the front door, he discovers a pile of mail lying on the ground. He picks up one of the letters and begins reading. His demeanor shifts, as anguish washes over him, and tears build up in his eyes. As he stands there, he has a quick flashback of his family. In the recollection, Ray is at home with his wife, Kim, and their 2 children, Victoria and Max. It's a typical morning, and they're all gathered at the breakfast table, laughing and talking as they prepare for the day. Max, with a cheeky grin, informs everyone that Victoria has a boyfriend who is older than her. Hearing this, Ray grins and turns to Victoria, offering her a gentle but protective reminder to be cautious around boys. The moment is warm and full of love, but as the flashback fades, Ray is thrust back into the present, alone and consumed by despair. He slowly gets himself up and moves to the kitchen. He pours himself a drink, desperate to get away from the weight of his sad memories. As he sips, the alcohol dulls his senses, yet his mind transports him back to another flashback. In this memory, Ray is preparing to leave for work. Kim, standing outside the door, expresses worry and asks what he intends to do about the execution he witnessed. Ray stops for a while, apparently torn, and tells her that he knows he should report it, but he is unsure. He does not want to get engaged in the hazardous gangster life and jeopardize their lives. The scene returns to Ray, who sits in a poorly lit, empty room. His face is strained with concentration as he devises a plan. Spread out in front of him are images of criminals, and his gaze is drawn to one in particular, a man named Billy. A flashback begins, transporting us to the moment Billy first appears at Ray's house. He knocks on the door, and Kim opens it to discover a stranger standing inside. Billy, with a casual smile, tells her he's looking for his dog and asks her to check her backyard. Kim, seeing no immediate danger, agrees and goes out to investigate. Meanwhile, Billy uses the moment to subtly study the interior of the house, his gaze sweeping over the layout, picking up on aspects that appear to interest him. A few moments later, Kim returns, informing Billy that there is no dog in their yard. She proposes that he check with his neighbors instead. Billy thanks her politely with a nod but takes a long look around the house before leaving. Ray is currently sitting in the dark, stalking on his computer, his eyes filled with hatred and cold intent. A flashback then transports us to the terrifying night when Billy enters Ray's home. Billy and his associate, Connor, sneak into Max's room and drag Kim, Victoria, and Max downstairs, their panic screams filling the air. Ray, already strapped to a chair, struggles weakly as his family gathers in front of him. Their cruel boss, Kane, calmly instructs Billy to shoot Kim. Billy pulls the trigger without hesitation, and Kim drops to the ground, leaving Ray in fear and unable to protect her. Back in the present, Ray is finished waiting. His mind is made up, and it is time to act. He grabs a knife from his home and goes straight to Billy's house. Meanwhile, inside Billy's shabby apartment, the gangster is preparing narcotics and injecting himself, already in a thick drug-induced haze. Ray silently enters the flat and confronts Billy, who is barely conscious of what's going on. Ray demands the names of the others who visited his house that night, but Billy, disoriented and belligerent, refuses to give them. Ray suddenly plunges the knife into Billy's leg, causing him to scream in anguish. He offers Billy a nasty command: make more narcotics and inject himself again. But, desperate, Billy attempts to move the needle toward Ray in a last-ditch attack. Ray moves quickly, and with one clean, violent strike, he plunges the knife into Billy, killing him instantly. Ray returns home, drenched in blood, and washes his body. In another flashback, we see Connor chasing Victoria to a nightclub. Victoria, knowing something is wrong, informs Connor that she is waiting for someone and decides to leave the club. Connor, undeterred, waits for her to leave and then creeps into her room. Once inside, he discovers her underpants and begins sniffing them, a scary hint of his dark intentions. Officer Shelby pays Ray a visit at his residence. Shelby shows Ray a photo of Billy and asks if he remembers him. Ray, attempting to maintain his composure, denies knowing him. Shelby then brings startling news: Billy had been murdered that morning. He reveals that Billy was a member of Frank Noonan's gang and speculates that the gang may have been involved in Ray's family murder. Shelby's insinuation is clear: Ray's perilous ties with the gang may still put him in great danger. Ray reacts with frustration and defiance. He tells Shelby that he will not live his life in perpetual terror simply because he met paths with the wrong people. He expresses his doubts about the British legal system, stating that he does not feel it will provide him with any meaningful protection or justice. In another flashback, Victoria, desperate and terrified, asks the gangsters for permission to use the restroom. Connor, still holding her captive, reluctantly accepts and escorts her. Once they are in a more secluded setting, Connor lets her go but tells her not to do anything smart. He then asks to see her chamber, and as they approach, his intentions become evident. He intends to engage in sexual activity with her, but Kane jumps in and interrupts him. Kane then brings Victoria and Connor back downstairs, effectively ending Connor's plans. As the scene shifts to the present, Connor finds himself in a state of panic. He anxiously makes phone calls, hoping to contact someone, and gets his car keys, ready to depart. Just as he gets inside his car, someone aims a gun at him. Connor's eyes widen in surprise as he realizes it's Ray, whom he assumed was dead. Connor, overcome with dread, tries to explain that he was merely following orders, but Ray coldly informs him that they are all responsible. In a flashback, Kane orders Connor to shoot Victoria, and he does it without hesitation. Connor panics as he realizes Ray must have killed Billy and is now after him. He tries to distract Ray before attacking him. During their battle, Connor slashes Ray with a knife, but Ray eventually shoots him. After the fight, Ray returns home and bandages his wound. The next morning, Officer Shelby returns to Ray's home. Officer Shelby tells Ray that they found Connor dead, who was also a part of Frank Noonan's group. Shelby asserts that they are attempting to connect all these murders. He asks Ray if he can examine his house for clues, but Ray refuses, claiming Shelby requires a search warrant. Ray tells him to go, and Shelby, frustrated but understanding, exits the house. In the flashback, Kane instructs Ray to turn over all of their phones, laptops, and computers so that he can destroy any evidence against them. Ray begs Kane to leave his family alone, but Kane says coldly that it's simply business for him. In the present, Kane receives a letter containing a list of the names of his fallen troops, a somber reminder of the devastation that has occurred. Back in the flashback, while Kane terrorizes the family, Max sees an opportunity to flee. He flees and hides inside a closet. Despite his efforts to remain hidden, Kane eventually discovers him and pulls him out. Kane brings Max back downstairs and kills him in front of Ray and Kim. Ray and Kim can only watch in horror as they witness their son's death. In the present, Kane encounters Frank, who instantly inquires about the incident. Kane says that Ray is still alive and moving closer to them. Evidently frustrated, Frank instructs Kane to locate Ray and eliminate him completely, making sure he no longer poses a threat. Ray follows Kane in his car, planning his next move, while Shelby monitors the situation and keeps a careful check on both of them. In a flashback, Ray confronts Kane, questioning why he is doing this. Kane's frightening retort is simple: he's doing it because he can. Fueled with resolve and rage, Ray vows to track Kane down wherever he goes. But before he can do anything, Kane shoots him. In the present, Kane walks into a building, followed by Ray, who holds a gun. As they confront each other, a shootout breaks out, with Kane taking refuge behind some boxes. Meanwhile, Officer Shelby arrives on the scene and retrieves a shotgun from his trunk. Ray and Kane's struggle intensifies as they face off inside the building. Gunshots ring out as Ray pursues Kane, who is hiding behind some boxes. They eventually stand directly in front of each other, guns pointed and ready. Officer Shelby jumps in right as they're ready to shoot. He tells them to put down their guns. Ray and Kane, both determined, will not back down. Shelby steps in at a critical moment and shoots Kane. Kane is surprised, his eyes wide as he glances at Shelby. Shelby, firm and resolute, informs Ray that he has now received justice. Kane falls, and Shelby's words bring an end to a long, perilous game of revenge. Following the dramatic clash, Officer Shelby encourages Ray to leave town as soon as possible before the police arrive to question him in the morning. He warns Ray of their imminent arrival and advises him to steer clear of the investigation. This time, Ray takes the warning seriously and drives away from the location. Some days later, Ray finds himself at a dimly lit pub looking for comfort. Frank enters the place and sits at the bar, taking in the surroundings casually. He informs Ray of their closure and expresses his lack of recognition. Unfazed, Ray stands up and approaches Frank with a hard, determined gaze. He shows his gun and his identity, establishing who he is. Ray shoots Frank in a dramatic and final act of vengeance, completing his search for retribution for his family's murder. Ray then exits the pub, returns to his vehicle, and departs from the town. Thanks for watching. If you are new, don't forget to subscribe for more of these recaps. Until next time, have a nice day.